I think just from personal experience, one more factor that I want to add to that, which is
Yes,
uh,
yes,
sort of helpful for or helpful in the argument of institutional versus ad hoc mediation. So I've
yeah,
had the occasion, as you probably know, to do some mediation to be involved in some mediation in India and overseas. And I think the big difference is in India, unfortunately, the training for mediation hasn't taken off. So mediator, it's important that he has to be trained to be able to mediate. Some of them rarely have a good knack of doing it on their own, but just by being a good lawyer or a good judge or a good arbitrator does not mean that you will be an effective mediator. To be a good mediator, you need to have the right sense of how to handle a dispute, how to resolve a dispute rather than come to a conclusion and decide who's right and who's wrong.
absolutely.
So I think training of mediators plays an important part, which I think institutional mediation centers like yourself are able to handle in a far more organized, transparent, and efficient manner. Which unfortunately the ad hoc side of things doesn't. They don't have the advantage of being trained to mediate and resolve disputes. So that's one more aspect I think is an important one. Do you think that training has been something that the CMC believes that they should or has invested?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is another favorite of mine which you have touched upon, and we can, maybe you and me, can go on exchanging notes on this for hours. It is a favorite point. It's a very important point, and like anything in the world, developing skills, developing knowledge, and training as a means of doing that is of utmost importance. That's what I've learned with my life, and therefore, this is not an exception. This is not an exception in mediation. Mediation requires well-trained mediators, and it's not about law. It's about psychology. It's about behavioral science. It's about negotiation skills. It's about many, many other things. Knowledge of law may sometimes help, but may sometimes even hinder. So, in India, for example, there are 12,000 trained mediators, I'm told, trained by the committee sponsored by the Supreme Court system. But apparently, all those 12,000 mediators who have been trained by the Supreme Court system are lawyers or judges. And this is where we should fall back on our experiences from the developed countries, from the first world, and see what has succeeded and what has not succeeded, and realize that many mediators, many popular and successful mediators in those countries are from disciplines other than law. There are chartered accountants who are mediators. There are
Yes.
procurement specialists who are mediators. There are infrastructure experts who are mediators, and there are lawyers who are mediators. So there has to be a mixed bag of mediators, and these people who have experience from the field of having worked in rich, complex conditions of the world, in complicated commercial and business scenarios, they need to come forward and be trained in those aspects of mediation like negotiation, etc., which they may know by their own instincts, but yet need to be sort of supplemented. What they know needs to be supplemented, and that's the kind of training which needs to be structured for our country. Unfortunately, and this is a very controversial subject, but I'll still put my foot in my mouth and say this. Unfortunately, there are certain government organized, or I'll not say government, regulators organized training programs like IICA, which actually invite and welcome people with domain expertise and not just lawyers. Whereas there are certain others which are organized by the Supreme Court system, make it mandatory that only lawyers can be trained. So we need to resolve these disputes, if I may say, through some mediation. And we need to get going with a very strong training program all across the country to develop mediators. But at the end of the day, if I may just digress a little bit, at the end of the day, I think it is not a question of, supply issue. It's a question of demand issue. Here in India today, we are not running short of even good mediators. We have good mediators, a few of them, who are enough to deal with those cases which are coming forward for mediation, those disputants. Because if they start coming in droves, to resolve their disputes through mediation, yes, then it will not be a demand issue anymore. It will be a supply issue. But we must get ready for that.